From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
And good morning and welcome to the program. We've got a lot to talk about today, and we're going to talk about redistricting the state of Utah. And getting some of the census numbers has really put the redistricting committee, the Independent Redistricting Committee, in a bit of a tight spot. So we'll be talking with one of the members from the committee. And then also there is a city council person in Lehi who is kind of putting her money where her opinions are when it comes to running for public office, especially if you're a woman. But of course, there's a big issue that's floating all throughout the state of Utah and honestly around the country as well. And that's what to do as we go back to school when it comes to protecting the public health. And what about the masks? Masks at back to school. And a loud crowd cheered as the city council overturned the advisory by the new Salt Lake County Health Department Director, Angela Dunn. And that name should be familiar to all of us. There will be no mask requirement in Salt Lake County schools, not even for the unvaccinated kids. And while there was a jubilant crowd yesterday, even flying a flag that was carried by people who stormed the Capitol, not everyone is supportive of the decision. We're very grateful today on Sunday Edition to have Heidi Matthews, who is the president of the UEA. And Heidi, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. And I have to ask, after what has unfolded yesterday, along with many other issues, of course, that are facing our teachers, some have been going on since the beginning of time. Others are very unique to our times and our situations. How are your 18,000 members reacting specifically to what came down yesterday in Salt Lake County?
Well, thank you. And it's such an honor to be on this show. I think our 18,000 members have about 18,000 opinions about what it is that we should advocate for and why. But where we come together, every one of us across the board is in our mission for fulfilling the promise of public education. And that means looking out for the safety and well-being of our students so they can learn and thrive in our schools. And that, of course, means looking out for their health and taking whatever precautions are recommended by our medical experts. And it means taking care of the adults who are in the schools, making these learning environments happen.
Something that has happened, and I don't want to get us out into the weeds of politics, although it is so active in this conversation. Former Governor Herbert once to me on this show and privately said he was just stunned at how politicized this issue of wearing a mask has become. And of course, we are not even mentioning vaccinations here. We're talking about masks. Has it surprised you along with being a great teacher, working with teachers, but you also work in the political environment of Utah? Are you surprised at how partisan this is?
I am surprised because there isn't a one of us out there who doesn't love our kids and want what's best for them. And I think where we are differing and what has become political is in the avenue to do that. The part that is very frustrating to me and to many of our members, particularly those in Salt Lake County, was when there is a determination that certain preventative measures should be followed in our school for the health and well-being of our precious children, that we should follow that. And why that has become political is frustrating. And it is really quite a distraction from all the things that we need to do in this back to school time to make sure we have the best possible face-to-face learning environments for all of our students.
I think of all of the challenge that public education, all of the challenges that public education is facing, teachers are facing, parents are facing, trying to get the very, very best education for their children and, of course, the students themselves. You mentioned the word distraction. How big a distraction is this, and what could be some of the consequences of this distraction?
Well, as you can imagine, I am hearing from a great many of our members throughout the state about, what we should be doing and how we should be advising. And the questions are ranging from what am I able to do in my classroom to assure that my students are as safe as possible, that I'm as safe as possible, and that I have the ability to implement preventative measures within my classroom, because I don't want to be out of the classroom. I don't want to be absent. I hear a great concern from people, educators who are also parents, who wonder about what's going to happen when my own child is on quarantine. Am I going to be able to work remotely? Questions of what if I'm out of leave time? Am I going to be expected to take a pay cut in order for me to be able to tend to my illnesses? I hear questions about the substitutes. I mean, we had a substitute problem before the pandemic, and now here we are once again facing another situation where we know people are going to become ill. We know our students are going to go back and forth on that COVID roller coaster of quarantine and in school and remote and face-to-face. And honestly, what we've just been advocating for right and left is answers, anticipation of problems rather than waiting for them to occur before we address them, and putting in place at the beginning of the year the best possible scenario so that we can stay in face-to-face learning and stay healthy.
Is Salt Lake County an island here, or are some of our other, especially more populated counties, dealing with these same questions? And are we likely to see things like this with a county commission or other councils overriding what the recommendations have been from medical professionals and the health department in their area?
That's an interesting question. And I think from what I am hearing, that of course issues related to COVID-19 and schools are throughout the state, but that it was much more acute in Salt Lake City because of the recommendations of the or Salt Lake County, I should say, because of the recommendations of the local health department. I have not heard of other local health departments who are anticipating making recommendations like that, and therefore we're not advocating for these preventative measures. What we advocate for is if a medical professional makes that determination, that it's followed.
Mm-hmm. What do you anticipate? We have just a moment left, Heidi, but with schools just going back so quickly, some are a little staggered here, but within the next 2 weeks, I mean, everything comes to fruition, getting these kids back into school. What are some of the things that local schools, local districts, local cities can do in light, especially we're talking Salt Lake County here, in light of the council's decision?
Well, I think we all have an opportunity to be kind and to recognize that we don't need mandates to do the right thing by following the medical advice. And I would just encourage everyone in our schools to do what they can to not only support one another, but do those preventative things so that we can collectively stay in school and have consistent learning for our students, face-to-face learning, and that we really look to the adults in our school and taking care of them so that we can have them in our classrooms for, not just this year, but for their careers. It's so important to uplift them as well.
Heidi, we thank you for joining us here on Sunday Edition and sharing your thoughts and the oomph and the power of the UEA that is engaged here. And we wish you the very best for the new upcoming school year. Now, next on Sunday Edition, we'll be talking with a person that is actually on the Independent Redistricting Commission here in the state of Utah. Since the census data came out a little later than anticipated, there's some scrambling going on up on Utah's Capitol Hill state. As if redistricting the great state of Utah isn't a large enough task, and especially now that we're doing it a little differently with the Independent Redistricting Committee. When the census numbers come to us a little later than had been anticipated, it's put a lot of pressure on this independent committee. And we're very pleased to have Bill Thorne joining us right now from the Redistricting Committee. And Bill, thank you for taking the time to join us here on the program. And how long a delay? What was anticipated and what was the reality in actually getting the numbers to crunch?
Ordinarily, the numbers come in January or February, which still leaves a very short time frame to get the work done. But for some reason, the Census Bureau was delayed in getting the numbers out. It was then promised for this coming Monday, and it looks like the numbers were released actually yesterday, but now the software vendor has to go through the process of making sure that their software can link with those numbers. So hopefully, middle of next week, we'll be able to actually start the work of drawing the maps and putting those out for people to comment on.
We've had a few little previews, Utah fastest growing state, and what was the number, 18.4%, but we're also seeing a little bit of the aging of the population here in the state of Utah, the diversity of our population, and of course with that kind of growth that we're seeing compared to what is the overall national average, you start to wonder where is that growth going and how is it going to change the pockets of population and spread it throughout our 29 counties. Just without having seen the numbers and really have a chance to pore over it with yourself and your colleagues, but what are you anticipating? Are you getting any hints of what might be some of the opportunities and even challenges in the redistricting?
Well, clearly most of the growth has happened in the urban areas. Southwestern Salt Lake County, northern Utah County, southern Utah County, those areas have had extreme growth. And so the districts are going to have to be adjusted to allow for that. And as a part of that, then the rural districts are going to have to get larger to encompass the same percentage of people. So I know people are used to the districts that they vote in. Those districts are going to have to shift. We're not trying to rock the boat, but we're trying to live up to our responsibility of making sure the districts have comparable numbers of people. And the population density has shifted towards the urban area.
Any conversation you have anywhere, honestly, in the country, redistricting comes up, gerrymandering comes up, creating secure districts for those who are already in office, or even redistricting something to someone's disadvantage, depending on who is in power. Utah has no exclusivity in this. However, we have had a rather dubious reputation, especially in the 2000 census. I've mentioned this before on this program and on my old radio program, but when even the Wall Street Journal said that they have never seen such egregious gerrymandering, and even the RNCC years ago said it was the most creative Republican modern art they had ever seen. What kind of a stage does that set for you, and what kind of a challenge is it, especially since you and your colleagues on the committee, you're first out of the chute on this new plan in Utah?
Yeah. Well, our responsibility is to come up with 12 plans and to submit those to the legislature. The legislature is free to adopt one of those plans, alter it, or do their own plan. But from our point of view, we have 7 members. We have 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 2 independents, and then the chair was chosen by the governor. And we've already decided among ourselves that we do not want to know political divisions in areas. We do not want to know where incumbents live. What we're trying to do, and one of our charges, is to keep the core of the districts close so that we don't disrupt everything. But we're trying to draw lines that make sense. So we're asking the public, for example, if they are part of a community of interest, which is a term the courts use for saying there's an alignment of their interests in representation. That may be rural ranchers, or it may be neighborhoods like Glendale, or it may be areas around Hill Field or other things. If they are part of a community of interest, we want to hear from them So as we're drawing lines, we don't unnecessarily cut through a community of interest. As a court say, our responsibility is to have similar numbers, but also represent community of interest, allow them to have a voice in who their representatives will be. So we're trying to keep this transparent. We're trying to listen to people so it's no longer behind the doors in a back room. We're trying to do it out front and asking people, is your community of interest important to you? And what is that? Let us know. So as we're drawing these lines, we don't unnecessarily cut through a community of interest without knowing that.
I think it's so important to mention for those who perhaps aren't fully up to speed on what this process has been, what it is hoped to be now. This is not an easy job. This is really, really tough. And to work it out, so in the state of Utah, because we won't get an additional congressional seat, but to see that the population is distributed equally with all of those things you mentioned, not only the areas of interest, but also there are certain geological and sometimes even man-made freeways, rivers, all kinds of things that come into play that create these areas of interest. This is not an easy job. And as the independent committee moves forward, and as you so rightly, without changing the Constitution, you rightly pointed out that ultimately it is the legislature and their decision that will ultimately take the move on this. But the people spoke clearly and loudly that they wanted an independent redistricting of the state. How likely do you believe the Utah State Legislature is going to be very accommodating and maybe not adopting everything lock, stock, and barrel, but paying very, very respective attention to this and adopting something that will be very similar to the recommendation?
You know, that's a little bit like reading tea leaves. We've had discussions with legislative leadership, and they are going to be doing their own sets of hearings as well. So all we can do is be as fair and as open as we can. And so to that end, as we draw maps, we're going to be documenting the discussions that occur while we're drawing those maps so that whoever is interested can go back and say, well, why did you draw that line from here to there or not include this area? Mm-hmm. That will be part of the notes and the report that we give, because then along with those 12 maps, 3 for the congressional, 3 for the House, 3 for the Senate, and 3 for the school board, we will be delivering a report that will try and explain what we did so that the legislature can look at it and say, well, they didn't just pull this out of the sky. There's a reason behind this. Hopefully that gives them enough reason to say, we're going to pay careful attention to it, but ultimately it is their decision.
Right. There are opportunities for the public to participate in this. There's a website, and perhaps as a final part of our conversation, you could give that website to our viewers.
Yes. The website is uirc.utah.gov. And this will give you a chance to go online and watch our meetings. All our meetings are live, streamed on YouTube. You can look at the different maps. You can draw your own map with the same tools that we're using and submit those. And we will document every comment that we get in. So that will be a part of our record as well. So any member of the public who wants to be a part of this process or just wants to watch what's going on, we're trying to make it transparent and available to them, because that's what we think the state wanted when they adopted that independent commission.
Mm-hmm. Bill Thorne, thank you so much for making your time available for us. We'll check in periodically with the Independent Redistricting Committee, and we wish you the very, very best. Coming up next on Sunday Edition, we'll talk with a Lehi councilwoman who is putting her money where her mouth is. We'll talk with her. Katie Koivisto is joining us now on Sunday Edition. She's from the Lehi City Council. And Councilwoman, I have been looking forward to our conversation, and I hope you don't mind. I'm going to quote from your Facebook page. And you say there that, quote, I will personally pay the $35 fee for the first 10 women who have never run for political office that put their names on the ballot. And of those 10 women, I will also donate $50 to any mom who campaigns. I have to ask the motivation behind this. What lit that fuse?
Absolutely. So last year during the presidential election, I came across an article from the New York Post, and it talked about how women were more likely to put their name into the political arena if they were encouraged to do so, more so than their male counterparts. And I felt like I could relate really well with that. I had no intentions 2 years ago of ever putting my name on the ballot. However, my husband and my neighbors really encouraged me to do it. I didn't think I was going to win, yet here I am. And so I felt like I wanted to be able to kind of give that back as well. I think that we have some amazing men and women in Lehi, but I really want to encourage the women to participate more so as well.
I've heard this from a lot of women and some of our great female leaders here in the state of Utah who are serving, have served in the past, that we need more equity. We need more women's voices engaged in the process, but I've rarely seen anybody literally kind of put their money where their mouth is. What has been the response so far?
The response has been actually really positive. Politics can be really, really tricky. So I was preparing myself for kind of a backlash about it, men versus women discussion. But for the most part, I've only ever got or received support for this. I've had a lot of women reach out to me asking me questions on how they can get involved. I've actually had men reach out to me who are interested in putting their name on the ballot and saying, thank you so much for doing this. We definitely need to have more diversity. So I'm actually really grateful for how positive of an experience this has been.
I thought it was interesting, too, on your Facebook page, you have anticipated a lot of things, including the questions about legality. Very quickly, maybe you can explain, this is legal.
Yes. So one thing that's really important to note is that any kind of monetary expense, money that goes towards encouraging anyone to vote, is illegal in the state of Utah. I want to make sure that anything I say or do as a council member is done legally. And so I just took the time to research this and to make sure that if I'm donating any of my personal funds, I want to make sure that that is a positive example of Lehi City that I'm representing, as well as anyone else that's interested. So it is legal for me to donate to any campaign that I see fit. It's legal for me to pay that filing fee, but it is not legal for any kind of political entity to donate towards voting or trying to encourage voting.
Councilwoman, I so thank you for joining us on Sunday Edition. We wish you well, and we'll check in again to see what the response is on all of this. And unfortunately, we are out of time for Sunday Edition today. Thank you for joining us, and music and the spoken word that's coming up.